What is it that actually makes us alive? What's the real difference between just a pile of complex chemicals and a living, breathing person? For centuries, this question has kind of haunted science. And it's a story about this huge idea that was found, then completely lost, and is only just now being rediscovered. It's an idea about an invisible force that shapes all of life. You could call it the electric ghost in the machine. Okay, so let's just dive right in with the big question, the one that basically split biology in two. Are we just incredibly complicated chemical robots? Something that could be completely explained by the laws of physics and chemistry? Or is there something more? Something else going on that makes us, well, alive? So this question basically created two warring camps. On one side, you had the mechanists. They were convinced that if you could just understand all the chemical parts and pieces, you'd understand life itself. It's a machine, period. But on the other side were the vitalists, and they argued that life needed an extra ingredient, a special, non-physical vital force, a life spark, to get the whole show on the road. For a long time, this was all just philosophy. And then it got shockingly real. Let's go back in time, to the late 18th century. The world was literally buzzing with this new science of electricity. They had static generators, Leyden jars for storing a charge. This was the high-tech of its day, and absolutely everyone was fascinated by this invisible power. Yeah, the excitement around this new force was building up, and fast. You go from Gilbert first giving electricity its name, to Stephen Gray showing it could be conducted, and right away people started wondering, hey, does this strange force have a role to play inside the body? By 1752, some were even trying to use it for healing. You get the first book on electrical medicine. All of this was setting the stage for a discovery that would change everything.
And here it is, the famous experiment by the Italian physician Luigi Galvani. He's got a dissected frog's leg, he touches it with two different metals, like copper and iron, and bam, the leg kicks, just as if it were still alive. For Galvani and all the vitalists, this was it. This was the eureka moment. The mystical vital force wasn't some mystical thing at all. It was electricity, and it was being generated by the animal's own body.
But not so fast. Another Italian scientist, Alessandro Volta, he totally disagreed. He argued, no, the frog is just acting like a detector. The electricity isn't coming from the animal, it's being generated by the contact between the two different metals. And Volta's theory, well, it was simpler, it was easy to prove, and it led him straight to inventing the very first battery. So in the huge scientific debate that followed, Volta's clean physical explanation won out over Galvani's messy biological one.
In that victory, it had enormous consequences. For the next 100 years or so, the idea of animal electricity was basically shoved to the sidelines. Biology went marching confidently down a purely chemical path, and that electric ghost, it was pretty much banished from science.
The final nails in the coffin came from these new theories about how the nervous system works. While one scientist, Dubois-Reymond, did prove that an electrical impulse traveled down a nerve, it was actually his student Julius Bernstein who came up with a purely chemical reason for how it all happened. Okay, so here's the crucial point. Bernstein proposed that the nerve impulse wasn't a flow of electricity like you'd find in a wire. No, it was a wave of charged atoms, ions, that were just moving in and out of the nerve's membrane. This explained everything they were seeing, and it did it without needing any mysterious animal electricity flowing through all that wet, poorly insulated tissue. It was just an elegant chemical solution. And this quote from the great physicist Hermann von Helmholtz, man, it just perfectly captures the feeling of the time. Science had made up its mind. Life was a physical chemical machine, and that was the end of the story. Vitalism was dead, and its big idea, bioelectricity, was buried right along with it.
And this way of thinking then got cemented into our actual institutions. There was this really influential report in 1910, the Flexner Report, and it totally reformed medical schools. It made them rigorously scientific, which back then meant rigorously chemical. And the whole practice of electrotherapy, which, to be fair, had a lot of quacks and charlatans in it, was just thrown out completely. It was officially labeled quackery. The exorcism of the electric ghost was complete.
But the ghost wouldn't stay gone. All through the 20th century, these weird observations just kept popping up. Little hints that the purely chemical model of life was missing a giant piece of the puzzle. The secret signals were still there, if anyone was willing to look for them. This quote from Nobel laureate Albert Szent-Györgyi in 1941 just says it all. Here's a biochemist, a top guy in his field, and even he felt like something fundamental was just being completely overlooked.
He even suggested that proteins could act like semiconductors, letting electrons flow right through them. The door was just starting to creak open again for electricity to come back into biology.
And this slide, wow, this shows some of the most stunning evidence out there. So when you amputate a salamander's limb, which it can completely regrow, you measure this strong, sustained negative electrical current at the wound for weeks. But if you do the same thing to a frog, which can't regrow its limb, you just get this brief positive spike that vanishes. It seemed like the ability to regenerate was directly linked to a powerful electrical signal.
So what is this electrical signal actually doing? Well, this incredible sequence shows us. Researchers took mature, specialized frog red blood cells and exposed them to a tiny current, just like an injury signal. And the cells, they transformed. They shed their specialized parts, they became round. They basically de-differentiated back into primitive cells, all ready to build new tissue. Electricity was the trigger for healing to begin.
And hey, this isn't just for exotic animals regenerating limbs. It's happening in your own body right now. It all relies on this principle called piezoelectricity. See, certain crystalline materials like the collagen and apatite that make up our bones literally create electricity when you squeeze them or bend them.
And this shows this perfect biological feedback loop. It's brilliant. Every single step you take creates mechanical stress on your bones. That stress generates a tiny electrical signal, and that signal tells your bone cells exactly where they need to build up more bone to make the whole structure stronger. Your skeleton is constantly rebuilding itself using electrical instructions.
So, okay, if our bodies are shot through with all these subtle but absolutely crucial electrical currents, what does it mean that we are now the first generations in history to live our entire lives just bathed in a sea of artificial electromagnetic fields?
First, let's just remember that using these fields is perfectly natural. I mean, life evolved with them. The Arctic tern flies an 11,000-mile journey guided by the Earth's magnetic field. Homing pigeons have a magnetic sense they use as a backup when it's cloudy. The American eel navigates the huge open ocean by sensing these tiny electric fields from the currents. This sense it's deeply embedded in the animal kingdom.
But what about our man-made fields? This slide shows the results from a pretty notable study in Denver. Researchers basically sorted homes based on how close they were to high-current power lines. And they found that kids living in those high-current homes seemed to have a death rate from certain cancers that was about double what you'd expect. Now, it's really important to say, this is a correlation, not proof of causation, but it was a finding that definitely raised some serious questions.
So how could this even work? Well, some research suggests that our bodies might interpret some of these artificial electromagnetic fields as a kind of low-level environmental stressor. It's not a shock. It's not a heat thing. It's more like a signal that triggers the body's classic stress response system. You know, that whole network of nerves and hormones that helps us deal with challenges. And having that on signal constantly could potentially lead to long-term health issues.
Which brings us right back to where we started. We went from Galvani's twitching frogs and this idea of animal electricity being the vital force, all the way to a purely chemical view of life that just dismissed it. Now we're rediscovering its critical role in healing and growth and control. So the final question is this. In creating our modern electric world, have we accidentally started to interfere with that ancient electric ghost that has animated life from the very beginning?